Hey folks, tonight we're diving into the delightfully complicated lives of some of the most inbred women in medieval history, born into families where cousins were the norm, married off to uncles, and sometimes both. These ladies were caught up in royal traditions that kept the bloodline pure genetically and politically. This family tradition was all about genetics and politics. So before you get too comfy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, only if you actually like what I do here. No pressure, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always a blast seeing who's tuning in from all over the globe. Now, dim those lights. Maybe turn on a fan for some soothing white noise. Let's embark on tonight's journey together. Juana of Castile, born in 1479, was the third child of two very important and closely related royals. Her parents were Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, the power couple who sponsored Columbus, kicked the Moors out, and somehow still thought marrying relatives was a solid strategic move. Juana came from Spain's Trastamara dynasty, known for their long history of in-family marriages. By the time she arrived, the royal bloodline was just stirred enough to technically still be alive, but definitely not enough to dodge issues like emotional instability, chronic melancholy, and occasionally a less than lucky chin. As a teen, Juana was sent to Flanders to marry Philip, a handsome guy. Although with that name, you'd hope for more, who was genetically top-tier Habsburg and also her cousin. Of course, the Habsburgs loved two things: crowns and ignoring all genetic warnings. At first, things looked promising. Juana was smart, impressive, and supposedly head over heels for Philip. Sadly, Philip wasn't into her. He preferred every woman who wasn't his wife. Juana's fiery jealousy didn't win her any fans at court, which was used to cold marriages and lukewarm loyalty. When Philip suddenly died, probably typhoid, or maybe just cosmic karma, Juana refused to accept it. She wouldn't part with his body, like literally wouldn't. She carried his coffin all over Spain, occasionally opening it to check on him, romantic in a medieval kind of way, possibly just plain crazy, her many political enemies. And yes, she had plenty, used this behavior against her. Her dad, Ferdinand, pointed to it as proof she wasn't fit to rule. Her son Charles, later Holy Roman Emperor Charles III, did the same. Conveniently, both men could rule in her place, while Juana was stuck in a convent for most of her life. So, was Juana actually insane? Historians still argue about that. Some say she was mentally ill from grief and imprisonment. Others think she was just a political headache in a world where being an emotional woman, especially one who caught her husband cheating, was basically treason. Either way, Juana wasn't just a tragic figure. She was the perfect embodiment of royal pressure, inbreeding, and the world's worst coping mechanisms. If there's an award for the most predictable genetic outcome, Maria Ana of Spain would be holding the trophy while her son drools over it. Born in 1634, Maria Ana was the daughter of King Philip IV of Spain and Margaret of Austria, both cousins in that uniquely enthusiastic Habsburg style. So naturally, Maria Anna married her own uncle. Yep, not a distant cousin or second cousin, but her very own uncle, Ferdinand III, Holy Roman Emperor. Because when your family tree is just a loop of ambition, why not double down? Maria Anna was smart and devout, fluent in several languages, politically savvy, and seemed kind. She brought dignity to the court, along with a genetic contribution equivalent to photocopying a photocopy, her most important legacy, giving birth to Charles II of Spain, arguably the most inbred king to ever sit on a throne without being kicked off. Cousins marrying in that unique Habsburg way. So, Maria Anna naturally married her uncle. Yep, not some distant cousin, not a second cousin, but her own uncle, Ferdinand III, Holy Roman Emperor. Because when your family tree is just a looping spiral of ambition, why not push it further? Maria Anna was smart and devout, fluent in several languages, politically savvy, and seemed kind. She brought dignity to the court, plus the genetic equivalent of photocopying a photocopy. Her biggest historical contribution was giving birth to Charles II of Spain, arguably the most inbred king to ever sit on a throne without getting kicked out. Charles didn't just inherit the crown. He got the full Habsburg package: an oversized jaw, a weak chin, chronic illnesses, infertility, and likely some cognitive delays. He struggled with basics like eating and talking, which is, yeah, sure, understandable before your morning coffee, but not so great when you're running a global empire. Was all this Maria Anna's fault? Of course not. She didn't invent the Habsburg matchmaking madness, but she played her part in the family tradition of turning political alliances into genetic nightmares. To be fair, she loved her son dearly and protected him as best she could during his fragile life. She was regent while he was still a kid and tried to shield him from court manipulation, like stopping a knife fight in a room full of hungry kids. Maria Anna died in 1696, just a year after her son passed away. The Spanish Empire she helped build soon collapsed in the War of Spanish Succession. That war kicked off partly because Charles II couldn't produce an heir, because, of course, he couldn't. If you ever wondered what happens when a family treats marriage like a spreadsheet formula, Isabella of Habsburg is your answer. Born in 1501, Isabella was the daughter of Philip the Handsome. Yep, that question again, and Joanna of Castile, also known as Joanna the Mad, though at this point, mad might be putting it mildly, maybe more like understandably stressed out. This made Isabella the sister of Emperor Charles V and the granddaughter of about half of Europe. Her DNA wasn't a mystery, more like a royal recipe repeated way too many times. A dash of Habsburg, a sprinkle of Trastamara, and 0 fresh ingredients. At 17, Isabella married Christian II of Denmark, a king famous for reform attempts, mood swings, and a personality that could declare war on furniture after a bad breakfast. Their union was both strategic and awkward. Of course, Isabella and Christian were cousins, but what really sealed their genetic fate was her Habsburg blood, repeating like a medieval loading screen. She was expected to bring stability, charm, and political perks, and maybe mask the fact that her family tree was starting to look more like a wreath. Life at the Danish court wasn't a picnic for Isabella. Christian's rule was a mess. He was overthrown, imprisoned, and even exiled. So Isabella loyally followed him around true love or stubbornness. Take your pick. Her health declined over years of political drama and exile, and she died at 24 from childbirth complications or stress-fueled royal maladies. Their kids naturally continued the noble tradition of inbreeding. One of them, Dorothea, married Frederick II, Elector Palatine, a perfect match for the Habsburgs, because if there's one thing this dynasty valued more than jawlines and titles, it was making sure no family gathering needed name tags. Eleonora of Austria, born in 1498, had the misfortune of being caught between the Renaissance and 1,000 royal expectations. She was the daughter of Philip the Handsome and Joanna of Castile, making her Charles V's sister and proud owner of what people could only describe as premium Habsburg genes. Her childhood, diplomatic waiting rooms, teenage years, and a string of almost marriages at one point. She was promised to King Henry, Said of England, but lucky for her, that didn't happen. Dodging that bullet was one of the few times Habsburg inbreeding accidentally improved someone's quality of life instead. Eleonora's first marriage was to Manuel I of Portugal, a man not only much older, but also her first cousin, basically the medieval royal version of marrying your own bloodline. She became Queen of Portugal, had 2 kids, and was widowed before turning 30. So naturally, the solution was to marry her off again, this time to Francis I of France, a guy previously. So, the obvious fix, marry her off again, this time to Francis the Bourgeois of France. Yep, the same guy her brother Charles V once held prisoner. Oh, romance. Francis wasn't exactly smitten with Eleonora, seeing her more as a political olive branch with a Habsburg return address than a wife. Their marriage was childless and frosty. He spent more time with mistresses than his queen. Meanwhile, Eleonora buried herself in books, prayers, and polite ignoring. Even married to a king, she was basically ghosting him. Of France, Eleonora stayed loyal to her Habsburg roots, and honestly, can you blame her? They might have been inbred, but predictable nonetheless. Eleonora outlived both her husbands and quietly slipped into political obscurity, dying in 1558. She was known for her piety, calm demeanor, and an uncanny ability to survive 2 royal marriages without causing a scandal. Olympic-level family achievement right there. Her life was basically a masterclass in silent endurance, even though she didn't spark wars or scandals. She perfectly embodied the Habsburg woman's job description: marry your cousins, produce heirs, and pretend the family resemblance isn't getting weirder with every generation. Catherine of Aragon was born in 1485, daughter of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, the power couple of Spain, and also major pedigree headaches. As Princess of 2 Kingdoms, Catherine had it all: wealth, education, titles, and a family tree tighter than any medieval drinking song. By age 3, Catherine was promised to Arthur, Prince of Wales, Henry VIII's older brother. Why? Because European royals loved marrying cousins, to cousins preferably ones sharing the same coat of arms. Catherine and Arthur were second cousins through John of Gaunt, which basically meant they were barely related enough to keep things interesting. They married in 1501, but Arthur died just 5 months later. Was their marriage incestuous? That question would shape English history, spark the Reformation, and confuse lawyers for generations. Meanwhile, Catherine was stuck in diplomatic limbo, a teenage widow in England, with no husband, no dowry, and still a royal pawn in alliance chess. Enter Henry VIII, Arthur's brother, and soon to be her second husband. You don't see many people marrying two brothers from the same family these days, but hey, it's all about recycling names, titles, and apparently spouses. Their early years were actually pretty sweet. Catherine was smart, charming, and politically savvy. She gave Henry fame, an alliance with Spain, and 5 pregnancies, only one of which survived. Mary, later known as Mary I. Unfortunately, Henry wanted a son, and after years of miscarriages and heartbreak, Catherine couldn't deliver. That's when things went from awkward to apocalypse. Henry declared their marriage invalid because Catherine had been married to his brother. Catherine, backed by the Pope, insisted it was legit. Thus began the most dramatic divorce request in history, loaded with theological debates, political threats, and a king hell-bent on creating his own church just to get out of it. Catherine was exiled, stripped of her titles, and forced to live out her days in isolation, yet she stubbornly maintained she was Henry's lawful wife. Her royal blood might have been blue, but it was suspiciously concentrated. Her marriage shaped English history not through battles or diplomacy, but by reminding everyone that marrying your own kin rarely ends well. Margaret of Austria was born in 1480, the only daughter of Emperor Maximilian of Austria and Mary of Burgundy. She was a Habsburg from birth, which basically meant her family tree was a circle drawn by an ambitious kid wearing a crown. From the start, Margaret's life was all about strategic packaging. At 3, she was betrothed to Charles VIII of France. At 12, her marriage shaped English history not through battles or diplomacy, but by reminding everyone that marrying within the family rarely ends smoothly. Margaret of Austria was born in 1480, the only daughter of Emperor Maximilian of Austria and Mary of Burgundy. She was Habsburg royalty by birth, which means her family tree was basically a circle drawn by an ambitious kid with a crown. From the start, Margaret's life was all about strategic packaging. At 3 years old, she was engaged to Charles VIII of France. At 12, she was dumped like a bad wedding gift when Charles married Anne of Brittany instead, who apparently had better geography skills. Margaret, insulted but classy, reportedly said, "I shall have my revenge," and credit where it's due. She later ruled half of Europe and played it cool. Her second engagement was to Ferdinand, son of Ferdinand and Isabella, and yes, her cousin. Naturally, this match was designed to tighten the Habsburg-Spanish alliance and keep the gene pool as cozy as possible. Juan died shortly after they married, and Margaret, still under 20, was rejected by royal husbands twice once. Juan kicked the bucket right after they got hitched, and Margaret, not even 20 yet, got royally rejected twice, once by choice, once by fate. She got plenty of other proposals, including from one of Henry VIII's sons. But Margaret gave them all the cold shoulder. She officially quit the royal marriage game, never remarried. Instead, spent her life diving into art, politics, and cozying up with family, which, honestly, is a pretty impressive life win. Appointed governor of the Netherlands by her grandson Charles VI, Margaret ran the show with Habsburg smarts, diplomatic finesse, and serious backbone. She brokered treaties, kept rebellious provinces in check, and was one of the rare European women actually trusted with real power, probably because her last name was Habsburg, and maybe because she wasn't busy popping out heirs for her cousin's cousin's throne. Despite a royal roller coaster of tragedies, Margaret managed to keep her scandal meter pretty low. She collected art, championed music, and even tried teaching young Charles some basic ruling skills. A tough gig when you're an emperor by 19 and related to half the planet. Margaret died in 1530 after a relatively minor leg injury turned fatal because medieval medicine was basically a fancy way of saying you're probably screwed. She's one of the few Habsburg women remembered more for her policies than her family tree. Though, of course, that family tree was still insanely inbred. Blanche of Castile was born in 1188, back when nobles thought marrying your cousins was a power move, not a genetic disaster, as the granddaughter of Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henry II of England, and daughter of King Alfonso VII of Castile and Eleanor of England. Blanche was royal blood thicker than hemoglobin. As soon as she could toddle, her family was busy planning which relative she'd marry off to, the winner Louis VI of France. Her cousin, not just any cousin, but a third cousin by Christmas standards. Like, you share grandparents with this guy. Should we keep doing this? But hey, medieval royalty had different rules if your marriage wasn't tangled in the family tree. It was bad diplomacy. At 12, Blanche sailed off to France to marry Louis, whose dad, King Philip II, reportedly said, "She's tiny, but she'll grow into quite the catch." They married in 1200, plunging Blanche into the royal chess game of dynasty, devoutness, and politely ignoring the fact that most of her husband's ancestors were basically her ancestors too. Blanche wasn't just a figurehead. When Louis became king, she was queen, and after he died, she became the real power behind the throne. As regent for her young son, Louis XIII's later Saint Louis, she ruled France. Like a woman who knew her extended family could blow up at any moment. She organized crusades, crushed rebellions, and tried to keep the kingdom intact while dealing with nobles suspicious of her because, she was both a woman and a bit too Castilian for their taste. She answered with diplomacy, force, and sometimes house arrest. Genetically, Blanche was a centuries-long mashup of English, Castilian, and French bloodlines all rolled into one determined little queen. If DNA came with warning lights, hers would have been flashing like crazy. She was devout, fiercely protective of her kids, and absolutely not to be underestimated. Louis Noce went on to become a saint, but it was Blanche who made sure he lived long enough to get that title. Anne of Bohemia and Hungary was born in 1503, which in Habsburg terms means she was born wearing half a crown and half a family reunion. Her parents were Vladislaus II of Hungary and Bohemia and Anne of Hungary, though the second Anne seemed like a genetic fresh breeze. As a woman who knew just how unstable her extended family could be, she led crusades, crushed rebellions, and tried to keep the kingdom intact while suspicious nobles side-eyed her because she was both a woman and a bit too Castilian for their taste. She responded with diplomacy, force, and sometimes house arrest, genetically. Blanche was a centuries-old mashup of English, Castilian, and French bloodlines, all bundled into one determined little queen. If DNA had warning lights, hers would be flashing like a disco ball. She was devout, fiercely protective of her kids, and definitely not someone you wanted to underestimate. Louis XIV later became a saint, but Blanche was the one who kept him alive, long enough to snag that title. Anne of Bohemia and Hungary was born in 1503, which in Habsburg terms means she came into the world half crown, half family reunion. Her parents were Vladislaus II of Hungary and Bohemia and Anne of Hungary, though Anne II seemed like a genetic fresh breeze. Don't be fooled. This was still a royal mess arranged in advance. Anne grew up thinking she'd end up as some diplomatic accessory with a price tag. And sure enough, by 1521, at 18, she married her twin cousin, Archduke Ferdinand of Austria, who later became Ferdinand III, the Holy Roman Emperor. Yep, first cousins, meaning they shared both sides of the family tree. Of grandparents, basically. It was a mirror match. Today, marrying your first cousin raises eyebrows, but in the Habsburg world, it was about dynasty stability and maybe even fewer birth defects. Right. Despite the genetic risks, this marriage had serious political clout. It united the Habsburgs with Hungary and Bohemia. Plus, they pumped out 15 kids. Yep, 15. Because if you're going to keep that royal bloodline pure, why half-ass it? Anne herself was described as pious, kind, and devoted, basically a classy way of saying she didn't complain about being the political glue holding Europe's giant power puzzle together. She tagged along with Ferdinand on his imperial campaigns and ran the court wherever in Europe the Habsburgs needed to remind everyone they were still in charge and really loved family weddings. Sadly, Anne died young in 1547, maybe from exhaustion after a lifetime of birthing kids, running kingdoms, and pretending. Her family actually cared about her. She didn't live to see Ferdinand crowned Holy Roman Emperor, but through her, the Habsburgs managed to swallow Central Europe like it was on sale. Anne of Bohemia and Hungary's life is a prime example of elite cousin marriage, a woman born into a dynasty that valued borders over biology, stability over brilliance, and somehow still churned out half of Europe's emperors. Joanna of Naples, aka Joanna the Ice, ruled from the mid-14th century. Back then, marrying cousins wasn't just trendy, it was noble survival strategy. Born in 1326, daughter of Charles, Duke of Sceaux, Calabria, and Maria d'Aviz, Joanna came with 3 legit royal stamps and at least 2 layers of cousin marriage DNA. Her family tree looked like Mediterranean spaghetti. On one side, the French d'Aviz; on the other, the Anjous of Naples. Her uncles were kings, her cousins were kings, and her marriage prospects were pretty much kings and cousins. Joanna's first husband was Andrew of Hungary, her cousin. This marriage was a political mess arranged by the Pope, rarely a recipe for happiness. Andrew was reportedly rude, unpopular, and disliked by Naples's conservatives. Joanna was not thrilled. Neither were the nobles of Naples, and right after Andrew got crowned co-ruler, he was murdered, possibly strangled with a curtain cord. Maybe Joanna's awareness, or call it divine luck, saved her. Let's just say it was mutual incompatibility. She went on to marry 3 more times to Louis of Taranto. Her cousin, James IV of Moray, also a cousin, and Otto of Brunswick-Grubenhagen, a minor noble with barely any blood ties. Scandalous, if cousin marriage was an Olympic sport. Joanna took gold 4 times. Politically, Joanna was powerful. She ruled Naples with authority, fought the Pope, and backed reforms in a kingdom dripping with corruption. She even got excommunicated at one point for backing the wrong pope during the Western Schism. You know you're rocking medieval politics when both your family and the Vatican want you dead. Ultimately, she was overthrown by Charles of Anjou, another relative who invaded Naples, imprisoned her, and killed her with a pillow, given her record with husbands and family. That's oddly fitting. Joanna of Naples ruled boldly in a man's world, married all over the family tree, and died in the arms of someone probably descended from her great-grandparents. Born in 1566, Isabella Clara Eugenia was the daughter of Philip II of Spain, and politically, Joanna was a powerhouse. She ruled Naples with an iron fist, fought the Pope, and pushed reforms in a kingdom drowning in corruption. She even got excommunicated at one point for backing the wrong pope during the Western Schism. You know you're nailing medieval politics when both your family and the Vatican want you dead. Eventually, she was overthrown by Charles of Anjou, another relative who invaded Naples, locked her up, and smothered her with a pillow. Considering her track record with spouses and family, that sounds oddly familiar. Joanna of Naples ruled boldly in a man's world, married into multiple family branches, and died in the arms of someone probably descended from her great-grandma. Born in 1566, Isabella Clara Eugenia was the daughter of Philip II of Spain and Elizabeth of Valois, a marriage between very close cousins, because by this time, the Habsburgs were less a family and more like a royal-funded genetics experiment from the moment she could hold a pen. Isabella was trained to rule, Habsburg speak, for learning diplomacy, religion, and how to politely ignore that half her uncles were also her cousins. Her dad, Philip II, absolutely adored her, probably because she was seen as the top contender to inherit the entire Spanish Empire, but the annoying male bias meant her future hinged on marriage, of course. To another Habsburg, she ended up marrying Archduke Albert of Austria, who was also her cousin, if that surprises you. Welcome to day one of European Royalty 101, together. They were appointed co-sovereigns of the Spanish Netherlands, a fancy way of saying, you'll rule a politically unstable mess and handle endless rebellions while reporting back to Madrid. Despite the challenges, Isabella pulled through. She ruled with smarts, religious zeal, and the calm focus of someone who memorized every papal message ever sent, while still managing her courtiers tightly. Her marriage to Albert was reportedly happy, or at least peaceful, probably because they shared enough DNA to communicate telepathically. When he died in 1621, Isabella kept ruling solo as governor for the Spanish crown. She swore in and dressed like a nun. But that didn't slow her down one bit. She oversaw peace treaties, kept provinces loyal, and even managed a functioning postal service. Yep, the Habsburgs trusted her with war, rebellion, and logistics. Talk about holy multitasking. Isabella died in 1633, leaving a rep as one of the most capable rulers of her time. Her reign was a rare moment when Habsburg inbreeding didn't just produce twitchy chins and flaky rulers, but actual competence. Mary of Burgundy was born in 1457, the only child of Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy, and Isabella of Bourbon. Her inheritance was a huge chunk of Europe, a family proud of noble marriages to familiar clans. Expecting her to wed another noble with similarly recycled DNA. Her father, Charles the Bold, died in battle when Mary was just 19, suddenly making her the head of Europe's richest and most politically unstable duchy. Everyone wanted a piece of Burgundy. The French, the Habsburgs, neighbors, cousins, especially cousins. To keep things steady, Mary married Maximilian of Austria, the future Holy Roman Emperor, and of course, her second cousin, a perfect match by Habsburg standards, where the dating pool was basically family doing laps. This marriage had huge political meaning. Maximilian got Burgundy's territory, and Mary got a go-getter husband who could brandish a sword and sign treaties. Often before lunch, though powerful, their marriage was rumored to be surprisingly affectionate, totally against the arranged marriage playbook. But her reign was short and dramatic. Mary faced pressure from French ambitions, rebellious Flemish cities, and courtiers who thought women shouldn't rule unless they were good at sewing or something. Meanwhile, Mary pushed back, signing major privileges to empower her subjects, asserting her authority alongside her husband, and basically running a medieval Fortune 500 company with a kid on her hip. Then, in 1482, disaster struck. During a hunt, because nobles apparently liked to toy with deadly injuries for fun, Mary fell off her horse, broke her back, and died at just 25. A sudden, tragic end that forced Maximilian into mourning clothes while all of Europe scrambled over who'd raise the kid, signing treaties and waving swords, usually all before lunch, despite being a power marriage. Rumors say it was actually kind of loving, which totally defies arranged marriage stereotypes, but her reign was short and dramatic. She faced constant pressure from French ambitions, rebellious Flemish cities, and advisors who thought women should only rule if they were sewing or something. Meanwhile, Mary fought back, granting major privileges to boost her subjects' rights, asserting her authority alongside her husband, and basically running a medieval Fortune 500 with a toddler on her hip. Then, in 1482, disaster struck while hunting because nobles apparently enjoyed flirting with near-fatal injuries for fun. Mary fell off its horse, broke her back, and died at 25. A sudden, tragic end that forced Maximilian into mourning clothes while Europe scrambled over custody battles. Her death was a turning point. Burgundy, once a powerful independent state, got absorbed into the Habsburg Empire through her son, handsome Philip. Yes, Philip, who married Joanna the Mad and passed his jawline to half of Europe. Maria Theresa of Austria, born in 1717, was the sole surviving child of Emperor Charles VI. Her arrival was met with lukewarm enthusiasm because she wasn't a boy, but Charles, ever the optimist, or maybe just clueless about European politics. Yeah, I know she's a woman, but she still gets the empire. All right, fair warning, Europe didn't buy that. When Charles VI kicked the bucket in 1740, Maria Theresa inherited the vast Habsburg lands and a diplomatic dumpster fire. Nearly every European power challenged her claim. Why? Because she had the nerve to be a crowned queen who wasn't even married to her cousin yet. Actually, scratch that. She did marry Francis Stephen of Lorraine, technically a distant relative, and their union produced 16 kids, including emperors, empresses, and later Marie Antoinette. Yeah, let them eat cake. With that many descendants, Maria Theresa didn't just pass down the crown, she passed down all the chromosomes too. But don't get it twisted. This wasn't some pampered ruler hiding behind velvet curtains. Maria Theresa was one of the most effective monarchs of her time. She reformed the army, overhauled taxes, centralized bureaucracy, and modernized education, all while pregnant, roughly every 2 years. That's multitasking on a whole other level, making even today's supermoms look like part-time gig workers. Still, she was a Habsburg, which means she was moderately micromanaging, strictly Catholic, and had a habit of marrying her kids off to the same handful of families over and over. The result, a tighter-than-ever Habsburg cousin network spreading across Europe like a royally aggressive ivy plant. She ruled until her death in 1780, outliving her husband, surviving numerous wars, and making sure the Habsburg name echoed across the continent for at least another generation or 5. Her son, Joseph, aka Joseph II, Holy Roman Emperor, took over the empire, and her genetic legacy marched boldly into the Age of Enlightenment. Born in 1384, Yolande of Aragon was royal from cradle to grave, daughter of King John I of Aragon, and a guy who was, well, brutal. In other words, she had more noble surnames than most people have teeth. Naturally, her family tree looked less like a tree and more like a tangled mess of repeating roots, where half your relatives could also be your future in-laws. Yolande's childhood was pure royalty. She was smart, politically savvy, and by medieval standards, downright dangerous. This made her both a prized asset to the dynasty and a nightmare for anyone hoping for a calm, quiet queen. She married Louis II of Anjou, a French prince, and yes, her cousin too, because nothing says true love like your great-grandparents hooking up. As Duchess of Anjou and Queen of Naples, though mostly on paper, Yolande never settled for sitting still and embroidering crests. She was the backstage mastermind of alliances, a military sponsor, and fun fact, one of the few royals who genuinely supported Joan of Arc and survived the political aftermath. While her husband chased a throne he couldn't hold, Yolande ran the show. She built armies, negotiated treaties, managed estates, and was the real power behind Anjou. Her kids were married off to other royals, often cousins, and she personally made sure they had the political edge and just enough Habsburg DNA to keep things legit. Her son, René of Anjou, was known as a good guy probably because he inherited mom's brains and only some of the family chromosomes. Her daughter Marie married Charles III of France, giving Yolande influence over the French throne and, more importantly, the mastermind behind alliances, army funder, and, interestingly, one of the few royals who actually supported Joan of Arc and lived through the messy politics that followed. While her husband was busy chasing a throne he couldn't grab, Yolande ran the show. She built armies, negotiated treaties, managed estates, and was the real power in Anjou. Her kids married other royals, usually cousins, and she personally made sure they had both the political edge and just enough Habsburg DNA to be legit. Her son, René of Anjou, was known as a decent guy probably because he inherited mom's brains and only some of the family chromosomes. Her daughter Marie married Charles III of France, giving Yolande influence over the French throne and, more importantly, control over Joan of Arc's military campaigns without ever having to lift a sword. Yolande wasn't just a name stitched into royal tapestries. She was one of the rare medieval women who held power without officially sitting on the throne. Behind every weak king and ambitious general, there was a Yolande. Occasionally, rolling her eyes and redrawing the maps, she died in 1442, outliving her enemies, husband, and the worst of. Sure, she had royal blood, but she was sharp, calculating, and just as influential as the kings she quietly outplayed. Margaret of York was born in 1446, daughter of Richard Plantagenet, Duke of York, and Cecily Neville so noble they probably tripped over their own family crests entering a room. She was sister to Edward IV, Richard III, and about half of the Wars of the Roses. Margaret's DNA was basically programmed for scheming, bold moves, and flirtatious charm. Naturally, she married Charles, the bold Duke of Burgundy, a man famous for ambition, terrifying military obsession, and, oh yeah, being another cousin in Europe's genetic soup, their 1468 marriage wasn't about love, but more about giving France a headache. Margaret brought prestige to England. Charles brought a sharp beard and stubbornness. Despite the political matchmaking, their marriage was reportedly respectful and, dare I say, effective. Margaret surprisingly fit right into the Burgundy court, which was less medieval grime and more pre-Renaissance Instagram overflowing with silks, tapestries, tiny dogs, and an unhealthy obsession with embroidery. Her smarts and diplomacy quickly earned her the nickname the Grand Lady of the Netherlands. She hosted officials, managed royal finances, and even handled communications when Charles was off doing his usual thing, usually starting wars. The guy never shut up after he died. Shocker. Margaret didn't just pack up and retire. Nope. She doubled down. She became regent and guardian to Charles's daughter, Mary of Burgundy, an advisor to her son-in-law, Maximilian of Austria. And yes, that Maximilian married Mary and spread the Habsburg name to more branches across Europe. Like a particularly smug virus, Margaret had no kids of her own, but her influence on dynasty politics was undeniable. She helped raise Philip the Handsome, who married Joanna the Mad, eventually giving the world's Charles V. So, if you're wondering where that ridiculously arrogant ambition of that era started, Margaret helped raise it. She died in 1503, outliving her siblings, most enemies, and Burgundy's fading glory days. She may not have added a single new bloodline to the family tree, but rest assured, she tightened those ties with perfect rituals and just enough royal ego to keep it all going strong. Catherine de' Medici was born in 1519 to the powerful but scandal-prone Medici family in Florence. Technically, she wasn't born into a Habsburg inbreeding nightmare, meaning at least some of her ancestors weren't cousins, so Catherine made up for lost royal bonding by marrying into the French royal family and assembling a mini army of kings with familiar genes. Her husband was Henry II of France, not a blood cousin, but definitely a political close relative. Their marriage was strategic. Italy met France, money met military power, and media ambition met Bourbon drama. Catherine adapted quickly. She arrived in France with zero real influence, a suspicious accent, and an awkward third wheel named Diane de Poitiers, Henry's openly flaunted mistress. Undeterred, Catherine spent a decade quietly building alliances, learning court intrigue, and raising kids. Exactly 10 years. And yes, most of those kids married cousins because, though Catherine wasn't born a Habsburg, she definitely learned how to raise royal kids like one. When Henry died, facing military power, and their media ambitions collided dramatically with bourbon whiskey, Catherine, on the other hand, adapted pretty fast. She arrived in France with zero real influence, a questionable accent, and this awkward third wheel named Diane de Poitiers, the openly acknowledged mistress of her husband, not one to give up. Catherine spent a whole decade quietly building alliances, digging into court intrigues, and raising kids. Exactly 10 years. And yep, Most of those kids married their cousins because, even though Catherine wasn't born a Habsburg, she definitely learned how to raise kids like one. When Henry died in a jousting accident, yes, nothing screams fragile masculinity like a spear poking your eye during sports. Catherine became the Queen Regent and suddenly the most powerful woman in France. Her sons, Francis II, Charles the Marines, and Henry V, each took turns wearing the crown, and Catherine ruled from behind the scenes for every single one of them. She was a devout Catholic, but politically flexible, which in 16th century France meant she occasionally sponsored Protestant weddings and sometimes arranged massive Protestant massacres at those very weddings. Oh, the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. Oh boy. Her reputation took a serious hit after that, even for a woman who married off her daughter to 3 major European dynasties. That was a bit much. Catherine got blamed for pretty much everything: religious wars, court corruption, suspicious poisonings at state dinners. But she was also an art patron, a clever strategist, and somehow kept the Valois dynasty afloat despite endless wars, rebellious nobles, and family dinners that desperately needed a food taster and a lot of wine. She died in 1589, politically exhausted, but still scheming, because, of course, those dinners required food tasters and plenty of wine. She died in 1589, politically drained, but still plotting. Her legacy, a royal generation, suspiciously similar in looks, ruling through a mix of charm, Catholic guilt, and enthusiastic cousin hugging. In ancient Greece, sleep wasn't just about catching some Z's. It was a sacred act, a bridge to the divine. And nowhere was this clearer than Asclepius, the dream temple dedicated to the healing god. Asclepius. This wasn't a cozy little shrine or a humble temple. It was massive spiritual complexes where the sick, the weary, and the hopeful came not just to heal, but to transform. Preparing for sleep at these retreats wasn't just hopping into bed. It started with a purification ritual. Pilgrims fasted for days, bathed in sacred springs, sacrificed animals, and often abstained from sex or even certain thoughts. The goal was to cleanse body and soul before the incubation, spiritual sleep, where healing visions might appear. Inside the abaton, a dark, enclosed room, supplicants eventually lay down on stone slabs or animal skins. Torches flickered on the walls. Priests whispered prayers and burned incense. Sleeping there was a deliberate descent into another realm. Dreams weren't random or meaningless. They were believed to be direct messages from Asclepius himself, offering symbolic or sometimes literal instructions for healing. People might dream of snakes slithering over their bodies, which weirdly was considered a good sign. Snakes were sacred to Asclepius, symbolizing rejuvenation and divine intervention. In fact, harmless snakes were allowed to roam the temple grounds, especially the sleeping quarters. Yes, people deliberately nodded off surrounded by snakes and thought it was a sacred honor. Come morning, temple priests, many more like dream analysts than doctors, would help interpret the visions. Sometimes they prescribed herbal remedies or diet changes. Other times, the dream itself was the cure, believed to realign the soul or spirit. The dream temples of ancient Greece show us that for the ancients, sleep wasn't just a biological need, it was a mystical journey, a chat with the gods, and if you were lucky, a midnight whisper from the divine might not only heal your body but change your fate. In ancient Egypt, sleep wasn't just not being awake, it was a mini death, a time when the soul or spirit left the body to wander through spiritual realms, to guide that journey and protect the dreamer from evil forces. Egyptians developed sleep rituals, part mystical, part medical, and totally tied to their cosmic worldview. Before bed, many Egyptians, especially the rich or priests, performed elaborate nightly ceremonies. Incense was central, frankincense and myrrh. Clergy often performed elaborate nighttime rituals. Incense played the starring role. Frankincense and myrrh weren't just weird smells, they were sacred tools. People believed burning these resins could cleanse the air, ward off demons, beg for divine favors, and calm the mind. The smoke itself symbolized prayers drifting up to the heavens, wrapping the sleeper in divine protection. Then came the chants or prayers, usually recited loudly by priests or whispered privately by individuals. These spells aren't just lullabies before bed. They're like spiritual bodyguards, calling on gods like Thoth, the god of wisdom and dreams, or Bez, the dwarf lion-faced god who scares off nightmares and evil spirits. Bez's face often gets carved on headboards or painted on bedroom walls. His weird expressions are meant to scare off any creepy things lurking in the dark. Bedrooms were set up as sacred spaces. Beds were usually raised and made of woven fabric or wood, and some even had amulets or protective symbols hidden inside. Special headrests, which look pretty uncomfortable by today's standards, were believed to help the soul align with the stars during sleep. Direction mattered a lot to the Egyptians. Many chose to sleep facing the sunrise or constellations like Orion, linked to Osiris and the afterlife. If someone had troubling dreams or sought divine insight, they might visit a temple, especially ones dedicated to Serapis or Imhotep, where dream incubation rituals happened, kind of like in Greece. There, sleep was invited with hymns, oils, and incense, but always with the goal of getting guidance from the other side. For ancient Egyptians, bedtime prep wasn't just for comfort, it was a ritual dance aiming to harmonize body, soul, and the universe. Sleep was dangerous, sacred, and full of potential in ancient Babylon. The line between dreams and fate was razor thin. Sleep wasn't just a passive act, it was a battlefield of omens, souls, and divine messages. Babylonians took their dreams very seriously, so seriously. In fact, entire professions revolved around them. Dream interpreters called Shailu were trained to decode the nighttime visions of kings and commoners alike before sleeping. Babylonians usually performed protective rituals to make sure only the right dreams came calling. They believed dreams could be sent by gods like Marduk or Ishtar, but also by demons or wandering spirits to keep the bad stuff away. People wore amulets, placed protective tablets under their beds, and painted magical symbols around their sleeping spots. Basically, a spiritual security system. Incense made from cypress, cedar, and willow was burned at sunset, filling the house with sacred smoke, not just to make it smell nice. They believed it cleansed the space and calmed the gods. For Babylonians, sleep wasn't just rest, it was a gateway to divine communication, and the gods liked their entrances tidy. Many read prayers or chants at night to encourage prophetic dreams. These prayers begged for clarity, protection from false illusions, and safety while navigating the dream world. So if someone wanted guidance on a decision like whether to go to war, plant crops, or propose, they might sleep in a temple or outside. This was called dream incubation. People hoped the gods would send a vivid, unmistakable dream to guide their next move with zero room for doubt. And when dreams showed up, they were recorded on clay tablets, sometimes with sketches of what they contained. Over time, Babylonians compiled dream dictionaries, huge catalogs of symbols and how to interpret them. Dreaming of lions might mean victory in battle. Dreaming of drowning predicted betrayal. These books were so influential. Their structure later shaped how Greeks and Romans analyzed dreams. For Babylonians, dreams weren't meaningless mental noise. They were messages from the divine realm, and every night was a chance to read the gods' intentions. As long as you followed the rituals and slept under divine protection in ancient Vedic India, early on, sleep wasn't just a biological need, it was a cosmic event. The Vedas, written thousands of years ago, describe sleep as a sacred state when the Atman, or soul, returns to the cosmic spirit, Brahman, before being reborn at dawn. And like any sacred ritual, falling asleep demands prep, discipline, and awareness. One of the key parts of ancient Indian sleep culture was breath control, called pranayama. Practitioners were taught to calm the mind and slow their breathing before bed, not just to crash quickly, but to sync their breath with the universe's heartbeat. No, it's not some woo-woo mumbo-jumbo. This was considered essential for the soul's peaceful night journey. Vedic sages believed disturbed sleep could mess with your mind, throw off your spiritual balance, or even cause bad karma. So rituals were taken seriously. Many folks chanted mantras at night, Sanskrit hymns praising gods, or begging for protection during sleep. A popular nighttime chant was the Gayatri mantra, usually whispered while facing the setting sun. The actual sleep space was super important. Sleeping with your head pointed north was bad luck, because that direction was linked to the realm of the dead. South was avoided for similar spooky reasons. Preferred directions were east, toward knowledge, or west, toward rest. People used natural bedding made from sheep's wool, cotton, or animal hides because certain materials were believed to influence the soul's dreams. Oils and herbs also helped. Prep for sleep. Ancient Ayurveda texts describe warm sesame oil massages before bed called piyanga. This soothed the nervous system, relaxed muscles, and readied the mind for deeper rest. They drank herbal teas made from ashwagandha, brahmi, or tulsi, or burned them as incense to encourage lucid, profound dreams. Dreams themselves were seen as reflections of a person's inner truth, shaped by karma, desire, and purity. A scary dream wasn't random. It signaled a soul out of balance. Sometimes, dream interpretation meant consulting a rishi or spiritual teacher in Vedic India. Sleep wasn't an escape. It was a return, a reunion with the eternal self, wrapped in breath, mantra, and sacred intent. In ancient China, especially Taoist tradition, sleep wasn't just rest. It was a reboot, a time when the body rebalanced internal energy and the spirit traveled beyond the physical world. Good sleep wasn't just about beating tiredness. It was cosmic harmony, according to Taoist philosophy. The human body is full of qi, a vital life force flowing through channels called meridians. If this flow got blocked, sleep suffered. So nighttime rituals focused on maintaining and regulating qi before bedtime. This included special diets, breathing exercises, postures, and even sleep timing. You didn't just hit the sack, you entered a sacred process to align body with heaven and earth. Taoist monks developed pre-sleep exercises like qigong and slow mindful movements with deep breaths. Then meditation calmed the spirit or soul believed to reside in the heart. If nerves were rattled by emotions, bad diet, or noisy surroundings, dreamers might suffer nightmares, insomnia, or even spiritual attacks. Sleep environments were chosen carefully. Beds made of wood or bamboo, materials thought to support good energy flow, firm. Low pillows helped keep the body aligned and qi flowing smoothly. Rooms were simply decorated to avoid overstimulation. Cleanliness wasn't just a preference, it was active hygiene. Sleep posture mattered too. Sleeping on the right side was best for digestion and clearer dreams. Feet and head aligned according to geographic principles that later evolved into feng shui. Dreams were seen as journeys of the Hun, the supernatural soul. Meanwhile, Po, the physical soul, stayed with the body while Hun traveled the spirit world during sleep. If someone woke feeling drained or scared, it was believed their soul had gotten lost or attacked. Amulets or talismans made from cinnabar were sometimes placed under pillows to keep the soul safe. Taoists didn't see dreams as just psychological events. They were diagnostic tools, spiritual maps of energy and karma. Sleep, when done right, is like an inner alchemy workout, a way to feed immortality night after night. Long before meeting Europeans, many Native American tribes saw sleep and dreams as a gateway to spiritual guidance, ancestral wisdom, and personal transformation for the Lakota, Navajo, Hopi, and other tribes. Dreams weren't just personal experiences. They were cosmic and community messages that could shape a person's fate or even the fate of the whole tribe. Night rituals varied by tribe, but everyone agrees that dreams connected the dreamer to the spirit world, usually with help from animal guides ancestors, or gods to prep for this connection. Folks took part in purification ceremonies. One popular method was the sweat lodge, a ritual sauna designed to cleanse body and soul. Participants sat inside a dome-shaped structure filled with steam poured over hot stones, chanting and singing to ask for guidance and clarity before hitting the sack. For those chasing deeper visions, especially young adults, tribes held vision quests, sacred journeys involving fasting, isolation, and often sleeping outdoors for several nights. The newbie would find a remote spot, build a small space or circle, and sleep under the stars with no food, water, or buddies. The goal wasn't just survival, it was to dream. Those dreams were then interpreted by elders or shamans, who usually decided the seeker's future role: warrior, healer, storyteller, or leader in daily life. Many native communities believe in the dream catcher, a popular symbol originating with the Ojibwe. These intricate webs made from sinew and beads hang above beds to filter dreams, letting only the good ones through while trapping the bad ones until morning light dissolves them. For kids, dream catchers are both protective and symbolic, guiding them in a world where dreams can teach, warn, or bless. The elders are often revered as keepers of dreams, folks who understand symbols and can decode the hidden meanings inside dreams. A bear might stand for strength, while a hawk could mean clarity or an upcoming challenge. Dreams rarely get dismissed. People talk about them around the fire, weave them into myths, and sometimes even use them to guide tribal decisions. In Native American tradition, sleep is a sacred conversation with the unseen world. It's not an escape, but an awakening. Back in the cradle of civilization, ancient Mesopotamia, sleep was tightly wrapped in sacredness. The Sumerians, Akkadians, and later Babylonians believed every dream was a message, and night itself was ruled by powerful gods who controlled what the dreamer would see. Sleep wasn't a break from reality, but an active state of spiritual communication, and prepping for it was as crucial as the dream itself. Mesopotamians had many gods linked to night and dreams. The top one was Nanshi, goddess of social justice, prophecy, and dreams. Her temple welcomed seekers looking for answers through visions, especially during sacred festivals when the veil between worlds was believed to thin. Worshippers would sleep in the temple courtyard, hoping for guidance through what they called the incubation of dreams. To encourage meaningful dreams, people performed cleansing rituals before sleeping. This might include bathing in sacred rivers like the Euphrates or Tigris, anointing the body with fragrant oils, and praying to Nanshi or Aya, the god of wisdom and magic. Priests often prescribed these rituals as a spiritual remedy for dreamers seeking help with illness, personal crises, or political decisions inside their homes. The bedrooms were modest, but spiritually solid. Small clay tablets inscribed with words or amulets could be stashed under your pillow or hung near your bed. These bad boys came with apotropaic spells, basically ancient ghost-busting magic, to keep away night demons like Lamassu. a scary female spirit rumored to mess with women and kids after dark. The demon slayer amulet Pazuzu was especially popular, protecting sleepers from harm. Dream decoding was serious business. Dream interpreters called Baru compiled thick guidebooks, dream dictionaries based on centuries of symbol observation. These tablets sorted dreams by content: animals, weather, food, celestial events, and even the feelings you had in the dream. A lion might mean royal favor, a collapsing house. Yeah, disaster's probably on the way. The Mesopotamians were the original masters of dream divination. Sleep in ancient Mesopotamia was never just sleep. It was a ritual, a risk, and a revelation. Entering the dream world meant stepping into the power of the gods. So you better have your prayers, oils, and amulets ready. Among the ancient Celts, from the misty Scottish highlands to the oak forests of Gaul, dreams were seen as gateways to the other world, a mystical realm where spirits, fairies, ancestors, and gods lived. Although Celtic cults left fewer written records than some other ancient cultures, oral traditions and later Roman accounts show that sleep rituals, especially among the Druids, were rich with symbolism, mystery, and sacred intent. Druids, spiritual leaders, and scholars of Celtic society believed that during sleep, the soul could travel to the other world, a place not for the dead, but for deeper truths. This world existed alongside ours, and dreams were one of the rare bridges between the two. To access it properly, body and mind had to be prepared. Night rituals often began with herbal cleansing. Mugwort, pine needles, and vervain plants still linked to dreams and visions today were burned or placed under pillows to boost dream clarity. People believed the smoke from these herbs thinned the veil between worlds. Some even brewed teas or potions before bedtime, whispering prayers to fairies or ancestral spirits. Sleeping spaces were chosen carefully with feng shui in mind. Certain hills, stone circles, or sacred groves were thought to be energy hotspots, where dreams hit harder or spirits were easier to reach. During festivals like Samhain, the Celtic New Year, and ancestor celebration, people would sleep in these spots to receive visions from departed loved ones or messages from gods like Brigid or Dagda. Some warriors and leaders sought prophetic dreams before battles, sleeping alone in caves or forests after fasting and chanting non-stop. These dreams were believed to forecast victory or doom and taken very seriously. Dream symbols like animals, colors, or landscapes were passed to Celtic poets and prophets in Philly, who interpreted them through poetry. A white stag might mean transformation. Dreaming of drowning in a forest could signal betrayal. Dreams woven to Celtic mythology, shaping personal fate and community stories alike. In the Celtic world, night was never quiet. It echoed with whispers from the other side, delivered into the dreams of those brave or pure enough to listen. In ancient Japan, the line between sleep, magic, and the invisible world was carefully navigated through a spiritual system called Onmyoto, the way of yin and yang, Born from a mix of Taoist cosmology, Shinto spirituality, and Buddhist influences, Onmyodo gave both nobles and commoners tools to protect their souls during sleep and tap into hidden messages in dreams. The core belief of Onmyodo was that night is when dark, hidden, chaotic yin forces are. The core of Onmyodo is the belief that night is when dark, hidden, chaotic forces are at their strongest. Sleep leaves people vulnerable to evil spirits called yokai or urai, making them targets for bad guys or negative energy. To fight this, practitioners used all sorts of pre-sleep rituals, mixing spiritual defense and purification. One such ritual was placing food, paper talismans inscribed with sacred spells, on bedroom walls or near the sleeping mat. These charms were meant to keep the bad vibes and spirits at bay. Were usually blessed by an onmyoji, a specialist trained in astrology, fortune-telling, and exorcism. These amulets could ward off evil spirits, block bad dreams, or bring good luck. Before hitting the hay, people often burned incense made from sandalwood or other fragrant woods. The belief, the scent pleased guardian spirits and created a purifying barrier in noble families. Chanting, sutras, or quietly reading Buddhist scriptures was a thing to calm the mind and drift into peaceful sleep. The super spiritually sensitive would sleep facing lucky directions, never north, because north was basically the VIP lounge for death. Kids, being extra vulnerable, were often protected with talismans inscribed with characters or special dolls placed nearby to soak up or shoo away negative energy. These dolls, called hitogata, supposedly carried the burden of any spiritual weak spots while you slept. Dreams were often jotted down in private journals or shared with monks and fortune tellers. If someone dreamed of fire, blood, or animals, that could signal upcoming illness, betrayal, or a divine warning. On the flip side, dreams of flying, waterfalls, or lotuses meant spiritual growth or good fortune. Dreams are messages if you know how to read them, and, of course, if you survive the night unscathed. Blessings. Dreams are messages if you can decode them, and if you manage to survive the night without a scratch. For ancient Japanese folks, sleep wasn't just sleep. It was a ritual, a strategy, and a spiritual challenge every single night, all under the silent watch of spirits and stars. Long before Alexandria ruled Egypt's coast, there was Heracleon, known to the Egyptians as Thonis. For centuries, it was the main gateway into Egypt. Bustling trade, religious, and diplomatic hub where Greek merchants, Egyptian priests, and foreign envoys mingled in a lively cultural mashup. But by the late medieval historians' time, Heracleon seemed to have vanished from history, its location forgotten, its name preserved only in faded texts and half-remembered legends. Many thought it a myth, Egypt's version of Atlantis, but nope, it was real. Heracleon once sprawled across the Nile Delta, with twisting canals running through, massive stone temples, and bustling markets. Giant statues of gods like Ammon-Garab and Horus towered over the harbor. Ships from Greece, Phoenicia, and beyond docked here to pay taxes and get permission to enter Egypt's interior. The city's customs office was one of the ancient world's heavy hitters. It was also the religious capital, where pharaohs performed rituals to score divine approval before their reigns began. So why did a city like this disappear between the 2nd and 8th centuries AD? A series of natural disasters hit the area. Earthquakes, rising sea levels, and a weird, sudden liquefaction event turned the ground beneath the city into quicksand, causing a whole chunk of Heraklion to collapse into the Mediterranean Sea. Over time, sand and mud buried the ruins, and the Nile's currents wiped away what was left. Heraklion was literally erased from the map for over 1,000 years. It lay hidden beneath waves, whispered about only by Herodotus and a few Greek scholars through scattered tidbits. No one really believed it could be found. That is, until the year 2000, when French underwater archaeologist Frank Gaudio made a shocking discovery off Aboukir Bay. There, beneath muddy seabeds, lay a city preserved like a time capsule, patiently waiting 30 feet. Underwater, giant statues, shipwrecks, gold coins, and inscribed plaques began to surface, showing that Heraklion hadn't vanished forever. It was just napping beneath the waves. At its peak, Heraklion was more than just a coastal outpost. It was the heart of Egypt's international trade, the first stop for merchants and envoys before they ventured deeper into the Nile's interior, strategically positioned near the Nile's mouth. This city acted as a customs checkpoint and cultural filter. Everything entering Egypt by sea had to pass through Heraklion first, ships loaded with olive oil, wine, spices, silver, cedarwood, and luxury textiles from Egypt and the Levant. In exchange, Egypt offered its signature exports: papyrus, grains, linen, glass cotton, and gold. Heraklion was the first place to record these exchanges, tax them, and bless them, usually overseen by priestly officials and divine statues. The Greeks who came there were often both dazzled and terrified by what they saw. These temples were huge, carved from massive stone blocks, with statues over 5 meters tall flanking the sides. One temple especially stood out, a vast sanctuary dedicated to Amun-Garb, a mashup of Egypt's god Amun and a local deity. Pharaohs would come here to receive sacred blessings for their reign, taking part in coronation rituals that cemented their legitimacy in the eyes of both gods and mortals. But Heraklion wasn't just about religion and trade. It was also an international city where Egyptians, Greeks, Phoenicians, Libyans, and various others lived, worked, and mingled. Artifacts pulled from the seabed include inscriptions in Greek and Egyptian, amulets, jewelry, and even tax records etched on tablets. These finds reveal a city that thrived not through isolation, but through connection, a city that existed and prospered thanks to its interaction with the wider Mediterranean world. Frank Gaudio's underwater dig uncovered over 70 ancient shipwrecks, many of which ferried goods to and from Heracleon's bustling docks, anchors, pottery, and coins prove that trade was both extensive and tightly controlled. The temples kept detailed records of taxes collected from imported goods, gold for the state, incense for the gods. In short, Heracleion was Egypt's maritime soul, where divine power met international commerce. It guarded the Nile, welcomed the world, and protected its secrets until the sea reclaimed them. One of the most jaw-dropping discoveries about Heracleion didn't come from coins or ships, but from the massive temples still resting underwater. These weren't some tiny hidden shrines. They were colossal limestone and granite structures devoted to gods who ruled the Nile and the cosmos. The city's crown jewel was the Temple of Amun-Garab, a huge religious complex serving both political and spiritual roles. Here, pharaohs got the divine stamp of approval and performed rituals confirming their legitimacy. Heracleion wasn't just a customs checkpoint. It was the coronation venue where Egypt's rulers spiritually bonded with the sacred order, the concept known as Ma'at. But the truly surprising thing, there's still so much left to find. When Frank Gaudio and his team dove into the silt-filled waters of the Abukir Bay, they uncovered giant statues, many still standing upright. Some statues towered over 5 meters tall, including a colossal figure of the god Happy, symbol of abundance and the floodwaters of the Nile. Other works featured queens and pharaohs carved with jaw-dropping precision. Even more amazing, some were found nearly intact, despite being underwater for over 1,000 years. Then there were massive granite slabs carved with hieroglyphs. One especially important find was the Decree of Nectanebo II, an official statement still etched in granite listing religious laws and temple privileges. Its survival underwater is a miracle, proving that Heracleion wasn't just a legend, but a major state-backed religious center. The temples in Heracleion weren't only places of worship, but also treasuries of wealth and knowledge. Offerings from across the Mediterranean flowed in gold, alabaster jars, ritual knives, and censers. Statues of Osiris, Isis, and Horus lined the temple halls, and ceremonial boats used in sacred processions, some found underwater, but surprisingly well preserved. What these temples reveal is crystal clear. Heracleion was the spiritual capital, not just a trading port. The rituals performed here shaped the fate of kings, blessed the economy, and connected the living world to the gods' realm. Now, everything is eerily silent, but preserved in stone beneath the waves. For over 1,000 years, Heracleion was lost, buried under layers of sediment, forgotten on maps, and considered a myth by many. But in 2000, the ocean finally broke its silence. French underwater archaeologist Frank Gaudio, backed by the European Institute for Underwater Archaeology MESOM, made a discovery that stunned the world: the sunken ruins of a city that defied time. Gaudio spent years studying ancient texts and searching the murky waters of Abukir Bay, just off the coast of modern Alexandria. This area had long been suspected to hide secrets, clues from Herodotus, Strabo, and Egyptian records all hinted at a once great city swallowed by the Mediterranean Sea. But until Gaudio's expedition, no physical proof was found. Using advanced sonar and magnetometers, his team scanned the seabed, spotting anomalies beneath the mud. What emerged wasn't just scattered artifacts, but a fully submerged city streets, canals, temples, statues, and shipwrecks preserved in oxygen-free mud, shielded from erosion by layers of silt and river deposits. The first finds were giant statues, including two 5-meter-high figures of a king and queen, believed to be a ruling couple who once dominated Heracleion. Soon after came a large bilingual inscription in Egyptian and Greek. Confirming the city's identity, bilingual inscriptions are every historian's dream. Tangible proof that Thonis and Heracleion were actually the same city, just called different names by Egyptians and Greeks. In the following years, Gaudio's team uncovered over 70 ancient shipwrecks, thousands of coins, weights, religious artifacts, and ritual vessels. What makes this find extraordinary isn't just the quantity but the state of preservation, unlike ruins on land. These objects weren't weathered or frozen in time. They were trapped in mud, untouched by the elements. Frank Gaudio's rediscovery of Heracleion wasn't just archaeology, it was resurrection. A city once thought mythical is now slowly revealing a stunning glimpse of a world long lost. And maybe the coolest part, only a tiny fraction of the city has been excavated. Heracleion still sleeps, waiting for the next dive. Heracleon's rise was spectacular, but its fall was slow, silent, and brutal, unlike cities wiped out by fire or war. Heracleion sank beneath the waves in a gradual, almost ghostly decline. No single doomsday. Instead, the city was destroyed by a series of natural disasters over centuries too quiet for headlines, but deadly enough to erase a civilization. The first culprit, tectonic activity. The Nile Delta sits on a seismically active zone, and Heracleon's foundations were especially vulnerable. Small but repeated earthquakes likely weakened the soft, waterlogged ground beneath the city, built on mud and clay instead of solid rock. But it wasn't just the shakes that doomed Heracleion. There was also a geological phenomenon called liquefaction. Liquefaction happens when saturated ground loses its strength. Imagine wet sand suddenly turning into quicksand. That's what happened under Heracleion. Earthquakes rattled the delta, and rising sea levels pushed saltwater further inland, causing the ground to literally liquefy and entire parts of the city to start sinking. Buildings, temples, even ships were dragged down into the mud. Over time, the city fragmented, canals overflowed, buildings collapsed, and temples tilted and sank into the mud. Over time, the city split apart, canals overflowed, buildings collapsed, and temples started tilting and disappearing beneath the surface. The bustling port gradually became unusable, forcing trade to shift westward towards Alexandria, which was gaining fame. By the late 2nd century BC, Heracleon's importance faded. By the 8th century AD, it was almost completely lost beneath the Mediterranean waters. The scary part, almost no one tried to stop it because no one could. Nature moves slow, but never takes a break. The folks of Heracleion didn't run off screaming. Nope. They adapted, rebuilt, and prayed like champs. Then one day, poof, it disappeared. Boats still sailed over the sunken ruins. Fishermen dropped nets where stone gods once stood. Memories of the city faded away until even its name became legend. Today, the sinking of Heracleion is a harsh reminder even the biggest cities can be wiped out not by enemies, but by nature's quiet, relentless hand. Heracleion may have sunk to the bottom of the sea, but the artifacts pulled from the wreckage paint a vivid picture of daily life in this once thriving Egyptian port. It wasn't just a religious or political hub, it was buzzing with markets, temples, courtyards, and shipyards, a place where people worshipped, traded, argued, and dreamed. The city layout, partly mapped through underwater surveys, showed a network of canals weaving between stone buildings and docks. Boats moved goods and people through these streets. Like taxis in any other city, Heracleion is often called the Venice of Egypt, even though it popped up over 1,000 years before Venice. Its architecture blended traditional Egyptian elements like columned towers, spires, and temple courtyards with Greek cultural influences brought by settlers. The people who lived there were a colorful mix: Egyptians, Greeks, Phoenicians, Libyans, and various sea merchants. Excavated artifacts include Greek amphora wine jars, Egyptian scarabs, and gold coins stamped with different kings' faces. This cultural mashup meant multiple languages were spoken, many gods worshipped, and diverse traditions coexisted sometimes, all in one family. Religion was at the heart of daily life. Morning offerings to gods like Amun, Isis, and Osiris happened as regularly as breakfast. Temples weren't just for rituals, they also functioned as economic engines, employing artisans, scribes, and priests. They hoarded wealth, enforced laws, and even collected taxes. A stone inscription found on site details temple ceremonies, including import taxes, proving religion and commerce were deeply intertwined. Food came from both land and sea. Fish and shellfish were abundant thanks to the Nile Delta's brackish waters, while inland farms supplied grains, figs, and beer. Markets near the Keys Island were noisy, colorful spots filled with spices, textiles, and stories from faraway lands, and of course, entertainment. Statues and inscriptions reveal music, dancing, and festivals, especially those honoring Osiris, featuring ritual boat processions and theatrical performances. Heracleion wasn't just functional, it was alive. In the end, Heracleion wasn't just a port or a holy site, it was a home. People lived everyday lives under the watchful eyes of giant gods, unaware their world would one day become legend, buried underwater. As Heracleion's luck faded, a new city rose just a short boat ride away, Alexandria, founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BC. In many ways, Alexandria not only inherited Heracleon's legacy. It replaced Egypt's old guard, becoming the Mediterranean's crown jewel and the new heart of Egyptian maritime life and intellect. But the relationship between the two cities wasn't just a rivalry, it was part of a bigger shift in Egypt's political and cultural identity. When Heracleion was in its prime, Egypt was still ruled by native dynasties, and the city's importance came from traditional Egyptian religion and its strategic spot at the Nile Delta's gateway. Heracleion was where foreign ships were checked, taxes collected, and sacred rituals performed to legitimize rulers. But when Ptolemy, Alexander's Greek successors, took over, they shifted focus heavily toward Greek customs, urban planning, and administration. Alexandria, with its giant library, massive lighthouse, and sprawling harbor, was built to wow the world and grab the spotlight. The Ptolemies rerouted trade through their shiny new city, giving Heracleion the cold shoulder in favor of a fresh Hellenistic capital. They imported Greek architecture, philosophy, and governance, turning Alexandria into not just a trade hub, but a center for science, art, and politics. Still, for a while, both cities coexisted. Religious rituals continued at Heracleion, and the temples stayed busy, but the balance was shifting. Administrative control moved to Alexandria, along with the elite crowd and international attention. Heracleion slowly faded into a shadow of its former self, still sacred, still respected, but definitely not the VIP anymore. Then came the environmental chaos, liquefaction, rising sea levels, and eventually Heracleion sinking into the sea. As Heracleion slipped beneath the waves, Alexandria stayed put, better protected and more stable on the coast. It inherited the legacy and traffic Heracleion once enjoyed. Today, the ruins of both cities tell two sides of the same story. One city lies buried underwater, its stones wrapped in silence. The other bustles with life, even if its ancient glory is mostly faded. But without Heracleion, there'd be no Alexandria. That old city was the gateway and foundation for Egypt's future. When Heracleion sank, it took with it not just temples and statues, but everyday stuff and sacred objects that shaped city life. Thanks to the nutrient-rich, low-oxygen waters of Abu Qir Bay, many artifacts are amazingly well preserved, letting modern archaeologists piece together not just the city's look, but how its people lived, worked, worshipped, and sailed. One of the coolest finds, giant statues, some over 16 feet tall, including kings, Egyptian gods like Isis and Hapi, and even a massive sphinx. Despite the passage of time, many temples still sit exactly where they fell, surrounded by rubble, as if the collapse moment froze in the mud. Their expressions, poses, and inscriptions are still visible, showing off the craftsmanship of the city's artisans. But it's not just the big stuff that survived. Divers found thousands of smaller artifacts, gold coins, lead weights, ritual tools, jewelry, and pottery shards. A particularly fascinating discovery was a stash of bronze ritual vessels with intricate carvings and religious symbols, Other finds include oil lamps, writing tools, and personal trinkets. Stuff someone might carry in a bag or keep on a family altar. Heracleion was also a busy port, and its maritime heritage is undeniable. Over 70 shipwrecks have been identified, many with intact hulls, wooden bodies, anchors, and nautical gear that help researchers understand how ancient Egyptians and foreign visitors navigated their trade. Some ships look like they sank while anchored, probably victims of the same earthquake that destroyed the city. Perhaps the weirdest mystery: ancient bilingual inscriptions, written in both Egyptian and Greek. These texts acted as legal documents, religious decrees, and temple inventories, giving us direct evidence from the past. One stone stele confirmed the city's double identity, Thonis and Heracleion, solving a historical riddle that baffled scholars for generations. Basically, the sea turned into Heracleon's accidental museum, a ruin, yes, but also a preservation chamber. The artifacts hauled from the depths aren't just relics. They're vivid whispers from a forgotten world, etched in stone, bronze, and silence. Heracleion may lie underwater, but its story is far from buried. In fact, rediscovering this city sparked a revolution in how we understand ancient Egypt's relationship with the sea, foreign cultures, and the divine. What was once considered a legend, a half-believed whisper from Herodotus, is now a powerful reminder that history still hides secrets waiting to be uncovered. Spoiler alert. Heracleion flips the usual image of Egypt as just a dusty desert along the Nile. This was a seaside city, cosmopolitan and open to the world. Its culture wasn't stuck in one place or closed off. It borrowed from abroad but kept its deep Egyptian roots. Bilingual inscriptions and a Greek-Egyptian religious mashup show a society that was adaptable, flexible, and pretty complex. For archaeologists and historians, Heracleion is basically a jackpot, not just for artifacts, but for context. It fills in the blanks about the late dynasty and early ancient Egypt periods. It shows us what a bustling port city looked like, how temples ran the sacred and bureaucratic show, and how natural disasters could slowly crush an empire's gateway. But the city's legacy isn't just academic, it's deeply human. Statues, coins, shipwrecks tell real stories. Merchants counting their loot, priests whispering spells in temple courtyards, sailors docking under the watchful eyes of stone gods, mothers praying to Isis for their kids' safety. All this life preserved underwater, silent for thousands of years, now finally speaking up. Finding Heracleion also changed archaeology's future, proof that sunken cities aren't just sci-fi with rising seas and climate change. Modern scientists are rethinking what might be hiding beneath other coastlines: Carthage, ancient Alexandria, even parts of India and Southeast Asia. Heracleion has become the blueprint for uncovering history in the least expected places. Today, its treasures shine in museums. Its story gets retold in documentaries and books, but the city still sleeps beneath. Displayed in museums, this story is told in documentaries and books, but the city still sleeps beneath. The waves, largely unexplored, vast, and waiting. Heracleon is no longer lost, but it remains a mystery, a ghost city between worlds, whispering through time from a sunken era of gods, trade, and vanished empires, long before modern dentistry and fluoride toothpaste. Ancient humans figured out a painful truth. Toothaches suck, and they didn't just suffer through them, they actually tried to fix their teeth. In fact, some earliest dental care evidence dates back nearly 9,000 years, showing early humans had more medical know-how than we give them credit for. In what's now Mehrgarh, Pakistan, archaeologists found human remains from around 7,000 BC. What they uncovered shocked scientists. Some skulls had teeth drilled with flint tools. These weren't random injuries or trauma signs. They were precise, deliberate holes, carefully drilled. The teeth belonged to adults, meaning they survived the ordeal. And if that sounds excruciating, well, that's probably right. No anesthesia, and just sharp stones, grit, and a strong tolerance for pain in exchange for relief. These drills might have been powered by a bow drill, using a back and forth spinning technique like fire starting, letting the flint grind into the enamel. This is the earliest known dentistry, predating Egyptian civilization by millennia. Why go through all that theories suggest it was to remove decayed material, relieve abscess pressure, or maybe even ritual reasons? In some cases, teeth showed signs of bitumen or resin used to fill cavities afterward, like a very crude filling. This wasn't a one-off. In other prehistoric cultures, teeth were filed down, pulled, and even dyed. In some African and Indonesian groups, tooth modification was common not always for health, but as social identity or spiritual protection. But the bottom line is this: humans knew teeth mattered and weren't shy about self-medicating for cavities. Even early on, dental troubles weren't just annoying, they could kill you. Untreated abscesses could cause infections, fevers, and even death. That explains why, in a world without anesthesia, antibiotics, just drilling out the rot, no matter how crude the method, could save a bunch of people back then. So, even without crowns or Novocaine, prehistoric folks weren't exactly clueless. They faced toothaches armed with stone tools, guts, and surprisingly precise aim, setting the stage for everything that came after. When it comes to ancient medicine, Egypt usually steals the spotlight, and dentistry is no exception. Egyptians didn't just accept dental problems, they built an entire medical field around it. In fact, the world's first known dentist was an Egyptian named Hassi-Ra, living around 2600 BC under Pharaoh Djoser. His tomb proudly bore the titles of dentist and chief physician, proving oral care was a respected profession in the Old Kingdom. But if you're picturing a quiet clinic with shiny bronze tools and smiling patients, think again. Egyptian dentistry was a wild mix of practical techniques and magical spells. The famous Eber's Papyrus, a 3,500-year-old medical text, lists remedies for toothaches, infections, and gum disease. Some treatments included chewing herbs and honey, both with natural antibacterial powers. But others, they'd slap a dead mouse on the sore tooth and chant spells to scare off evil spirits. Not exactly doctor approved. Egyptians also got the whole dental hygiene thing. They used twig toothbrushes, chewed fragrant sticks to freshen breath, and even made a crude toothpaste from crushed eggshells, cow hooves, pumice, and myrrh resin. It probably felt gritty, smelled like a barn, and lacked minty freshness. But hey, it worked. On the surgical side, archaeological evidence from mummies shows attempts at dental surgery. Some skulls have drill marks, similar to prehistoric Pakistan, while others show abscesses that seem to have been drained. Plus, there are signs of crude splints used to stabilize loose teeth. Still, most Egyptians probably dealt with oral issues without major intervention. Their diet was loaded with stone-ground bread, which let plenty of grit and sand slip into their mouths, wearing down teeth early and causing breaks. Interestingly, archaeologists have found gold wires and metal loops in some skulls, possibly the earliest examples of dental bridges or stabilizing devices. Scholars still debate whether these were used during life or added post-mortem. But one thing's clear, Egyptians got creative about preserving mouth structure. Essentially, ancient Egyptian dentistry was part science, part superstition. They understood infection, practiced hygiene, and experimented with surgical tools. Meanwhile, they prayed to gods like Sekhmet and Thoth. No anesthesia, but plenty of ambition, and that made all the difference. While Egyptians mixed myrrh resin and cow hooves into gritty toothpaste. The Etruscans in ancient Italy pioneered something way cooler, dentures, long before Rome ruled the Mediterranean. These skilled artisans crafted what might be the first dental bridges, a sleek, handy fix for missing teeth that influenced dentistry for centuries, dating back to around 700 BC. Etruscan burial sites have revealed skulls fitted with gold rings and wires holding replacement teeth in place. These weren't just functional repairs. They were status symbols. Often, replacement teeth weren't fake at all. They were real human or animal teeth, sometimes cow teeth, tightly wired to the natural ones, with pure gold loops. Fancy, precise, and probably super painful, but effective. The Etruscans were famous metal workers, and that skill carried over to dentistry. Their gold strips, used in bridges, were soft enough to manipulate, but strong enough to keep teeth in place. This wasn't some quick fix for some common folk. It was high-end dental work for the elite, done by skilled metalworkers or doctors connected to religious or noble families. What's remarkable is how aesthetic their dental solutions were. These bridges weren't just practical, they were made to restore facial symmetry and keeping up appearances. The Etruscans knew way before modern cosmetic dentistry that losing teeth wasn't just a bummer. It messed with your chewing, and more importantly, your whole face shape. In a society where looks and status were BFFs, that was a big deal. No direct proof they pulled teeth or did surgery, but the dental gear they left behind shows oral health was managed on purpose, not just when someone was sick, like their fancy tombs and blinged-out jewelry. Etruscan dentistry screams a culture obsessed with style, legacy, and dignity, even after kicking the bucket. Some dental bridges stayed put after burial, meaning they wore them in life and took them to the afterlife. Talk about commitment to your smile being part of your identity. In a world without dentures or implants, Etruscan gold dental bridges were the original bling, a dazzling smile from a civilization way ahead of its time. By the time the Roman Empire took over, dentistry had morphed into a mix of practical treatments, experimental surgeries, and some seriously controversial cosmetic stuff. The Romans didn't just steal medical knowledge from the Etruscans and Greeks. They expanded it, systematized it, and added that special Roman flair. Think ancient dental care with a splash of military precision and vinegar mouthwash. One of Rome's top medical writers, Cornelius Celsus, described dental procedures in his medical encyclopedia. De Medicina, he noted, tooth extractions, toothache treatments, and even mouth cleaning with abrasive powders made from crushed bones, oyster shells, and charcoal. Some recipes even used urine, which sounds nasty now but actually provided natural ammonia, a hardcore cleaner. Yes. The Romans gargled with urine bottled and imported from places like Portugal and Gaul. This stuff was prized for whitening teeth. Roman elites chasing a bright smile had to endure daily swishes of fermented ammonia mouthwash, followed by vinegar or wine rinses to freshen breath. Vanity clearly outweighed disgust. Plus, Roman doctors used clamps, scalpels, and tooth elevators for extractions and oral surgery. Archaeologists found metal tools alongside surgical kits, proving dentistry, painful as it was, wasn't rare, especially for soldiers treated for broken teeth or abscesses, since oral health was key to staying battle-ready. Meanwhile, the rich could get prosthetics inspired by Etruscan designs, including gold wire bridges and replacement teeth made from ivory or bone. Like their ancestors, Romans saw teeth as a status symbol. A shiny white smile was linked to beauty, power, and pedigree, especially in public spots like forums or baths. Even philosopher Pliny the Elder threw in his 2 cents, suggesting remedies like burning mouse droppings for toothaches or chewing mint to fight bad breath. His weird advice shows how seriously Romans took oral health in daily life. Roman dentistry was both advanced and brutal, painful, definitely, sometimes effective, occasionally. But for an empire obsessed with control, cleanliness, and looks, oral care was a Roman duty, no matter how weird the methods. While ancient Mediterranean civilizations used gold wire and crushed bone to clean teeth, the Maya in Central America turned dentistry into real art. For the Maya, dental modification wasn't just health stuff. It was about status, identity, and spiritual symbolism. They didn't just fix teeth. They decorated, carved, and embedded gems into them all without modern anesthesia. Archaeological finds from sites in today's Mexico, Guatemala, and, for the Maya, dental modification wasn't just about health. It was about status, identity, and spiritual symbolism. They didn't just fix teeth. They decorated, carved, and embedded jewels into them, all without modern anesthesia. Archaeological finds from sites in today's Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras have revealed skulls with complex dental work over 1,000 years old. Many Maya elites had. They inlaid jade, lapis lazuli, hematite, or obsidian chips into their front teeth, not after they died, but while they were still alive. These inlays were carefully set into tiny, perfectly drilled holes on the enamel using crude rotary tools tipped with obsidian or other sharp stones. It's believed they used water, quartz powder, or even plant resin as lubricants and glue to hold the gems in place. The precision of these dental mods is mind-blowing. The drilled holes are so symmetrical and clean that researchers think the Maya had a deep understanding of tooth anatomy, even if they didn't have fancy medical jargon. And get this, there's hardly any evidence of nerve damage or infections, meaning these procedures weren't just popular, they were actually done well. But why go through all that trouble? The answer lies in cultural meaning. For the Maya, the mouth was a powerful symbol, the birthplace of breath and speech, both sacred things. Modifying teeth was a way to honor the gods, show off high status, or connect yourself to cosmic powers. For example, jade was linked to life, fertility, and divine blessings. So a ruler with a jade-inlaid smile wasn't just showing off, they were flashing their sacred authority. The Maya also practiced tooth filing, shaping canines and molars into points, kind of like vampire fangs or symbolic characters. Sometimes the designs mimicked animal shapes, maybe hoping for spiritual protection or transformation, while some dental work was clearly ritualistic. Evidence shows others were functional repairs, like filling cavities or draining abscesses. So the Maya weren't just into artsy rituals, they were actually fixing real dental problems centuries before European dentistry took off. For them, dentistry was a mix of medicine, magic, and aesthetics, a whole worldview captured in every dazzling smile. In ancient China, dentistry wasn't a standalone science. It was deeply woven into the bigger philosophy of traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM, instead of seeing the mouth as just one part. Chinese doctors believed oral health reflected the whole body's health. A toothache wasn't just a tooth problem, it was a sign of internal imbalance, especially in the stomach and kidneys. Without drills or bridges, like other civilizations, the Chinese developed a sophisticated system of preventative dental care and herbal remedies that lasted centuries. As far back as 3000 BC, texts like the Huangdi Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's Inner Canon, mentioned dental issues. Early practitioners mapped meridians' energy channels, connecting teeth to specific organs. For example, pain in the lower jaw might relate to the bladder or stomach. Instead of treating symptoms, Chinese medicine aimed to restore balance through diet, acupuncture, and herbal treatments. To keep teeth healthy, daily oral hygiene was a big deal. People chewed on fragrant twigs from plants like willow and miswak, basically ancient toothbrushes. They also rinsed with salt water, rubbed crushed herbs, and even ground bones to scrub away gunk. Tooth powders usually had cloves, mint, rhubarb root, cinnamon, and ginseng, all for fresh breath, less inflammation, and healthier gums. Toothaches got treated with acupuncture, targeting points along the jaw, neck, and even the hands to ease pain and kickstart healing. This non-invasive approach was often combined with pichu, mashed herbal pastes applied directly to gums or cheeks to fight infection or swelling. Interestingly, ancient Chinese texts also mention tooth regeneration techniques using minerals or spiritual rituals involving cacti. Fossilized animal bones were believed to carry vital life energy. Dental reconstruction techniques using minerals or spiritual rituals involving cacti, fossilized animal bones were believed to carry vital life energy. These bones were ground into powder and sometimes mixed with wine or herbs to create a primitive paste medicine. There's barely any proof of surgery or tooth extraction in early Chinese civilization, but that might just show their cultural focus on preservation and balance rather than invasive fixes in many ways. Their focus on prevention, clean diets, regular hygiene, and whole body balance mirrors some of modern holistic dental best practices for ancient Chinese. The path, too, in ancient India, oral health wasn't treated as a solo act. It was a vital part of overall balance and the body's energy flow. This all came from an old-school medical system called Ayurveda, dating back over 3,000 years. Indian texts like the Karaka Samhita and Sushruta Samhita laid out detailed observations on dental care, tooth diseases, and remedies, some shockingly in tune with modern science. Ayurveda's dental approach emphasized prevention, detoxing, and daily rituals. One of the oldest tricks, dantavana, or daily tooth cleaning, using herbal chew sticks. These sticks came from special trees like neem, licorice, or bobble, all with antibacterial superpowers. People would chew one end until it frayed, then use it as a toothbrush. Today, this custom still survives in some rural Indian areas, but oral care didn't stop there. Ayurveda also promoted oil pulling, known as kavala or gandusha, where you swish oil, usually sesame or coconut, around your mouth for a few minutes. This wasn't just hygiene theater. It was believed to pull toxins from the body and help strengthen teeth, gums, and jaws. Modern studies have found oil pulling can actually reduce harmful bacteria and improve gum health. Backing up ancient wisdom with some science, the Sushruta Samhita, attributed to Surgeon Sushruta around 600 BCE, contains specific chapters on tooth extraction, jaw fractures, and mouth ulcers. Sushruta described surgical tools to remove damaged teeth and drain abscesses using iron instruments and herbal antiseptic ointments. He even recommended cauterization, burning infected areas with hot tools for severe cavities or gum disease. Ouch. Yes. But hey, it was a method. Ayurveda classified oral diseases into types like sensitive teeth, dantaharsha, tooth decay, dantachakra, tartar buildup, and gum inflammation, dantatvesta. Treatments were customized based on one's dosha, body type vata, pitta, or kapha, and could include diet changes, herbal rinses, and even meditation to ease teeth grinding or jaw tension caused by stress. For ancient Indians, the mouth was a sacred gateway, channeling speech, food, and breath, keeping the body clean, healthy, And balanced was not just a health choice, it was a spiritual duty in Ayurveda. Dentistry wasn't just a medical branch, it was a daily practice of balancing body, mind, and spirit in the ancient Greek world. Medicine and dentistry were deeply influenced by early philosophy, observation, and anatomy. Unlike some civilizations that saw illness as just a spiritual problem, the Greeks, especially from the classical period on, sought rational explanations for pain and weakness, including dental issues. They didn't have dentists like we do, but their doctors had surprisingly advanced oral care methods for their time. Greek thinkers like Hippocrates and Aristotle wrote about teeth in medical and anatomical terms. Hippocrates, often called the father of medicine, described tooth structure and eruption, causes of cavities, and even tooth extraction techniques. He believed that imbalances in the four bodily humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, could lead to oral diseases, especially gum infections and toothaches. For the Greeks, diet was key to dental health. Doctors warned that soft, sticky, or overly sweet foods could cause cavities. Instead, they recommended crunchy foods like apples, grains, and legumes to scrape off plaque from teeth. They also mentioned chewing mastic gum, a resin from the mastic tree, to freshen breath and clean the mouth, a habit still popular around the Mediterranean today. When problems came up, Greek doctors tried everything from herbal potions and stews to some seriously crude surgical tricks. Tooth pulling was done with metal pincers, usually no anesthesia involved. Ouch. Right, but sometimes they managed to dull the pain with herbal sedatives like opium, mandrake, or deadly nightshade for abscesses. Docs used a puncture technique to drain the infection, then rinsed the mouth with salt water or booze to disinfect. Aristotle was oddly obsessed with teeth, even claimed men and women had different numbers of them, which turned out to be nonsense. But hey, he was just trying to organize human anatomy like a boss. The Greeks also recorded rare dental oddities like late-growing teeth or even folks born missing some teeth. Dentistry wasn't its own gig. It was part of general medical training. Docs handled everything from ulcers to broken bones, and teeth were just another body part to study and heal. Basically, ancient Greek dentistry was a mashup of science, observation, and a decent tolerance for pain. Not glamorous, but built on the belief that the body, even your teeth, could be understood, predicted, and fixed with logic and learning. Over thousands of years and dozens of civilizations, ancient dentistry didn't just grow as a boring linear science, but as a global patchwork of innovation, rituals, and sheer stubbornness. From prehistoric fire drills in Pakistan to golden bridges in Etruria, from Maya tooth art to Ayurvedic oil pulling, early societies tackled oral care with a cocktail of bravery, skill, and basic necessity. Their tools were crude. Pain control was mostly a joke. But these ancient cultures made impressive leaps. No germ theory or x-rays. But they knew cavities, Zachin pain, so they did whatever they could to fix it, whether drilling out decay, using herbs to dull pain, or crafting fake teeth to keep up appearances. These early dentists, shamans, priests, and craftspeople laid the groundwork for a medical art that would evolve into a modern profession. Even more impressive, ancient dentistry was interdisciplinary, not just health, but spirituality, aesthetics, philosophy, and even politics in some cultures. A dazzling jewel-studded smile showed divine favor or social status. Elsewhere, missing or messed up teeth signaled personal imbalance or were seen as omens from the gods. Oral health wasn't just about chewing. Surviving tools like obsidian knives, copper probes, gold trinkets, and herbal scrolls are pieces of a story spanning continents. They prove that ancient folks, often dismissed as primitive or superstitious, were curious problem solvers. They watched, experimented, and passed on what worked. And many of their techniques live on. We still floss, rinse, and brush, use herbs like clove, mint, and myrrh. Some even stick to ancient rituals like oil pulling or chewing neem sticks, not just nostalgia because it works. Modern dentistry, dental care was spiritual, aesthetic, philosophical, and even political in some cultures. A dazzling jewel-studded smile meant divine favor or social status in others. Missing or misshapen teeth signaled personal imbalance or even served as a warning from the gods. Oral health wasn't just about chewing. Surviving tools like obsidian knives, copper probes, gold objects, and herbal scrolls are fragments of a story that spans continents. They prove that ancient people, often dismissed as primitive or superstitious, were curious problem solvers. They observed, experimented, and passed on what worked. And many of their practices stick around. We still floss, rinse, and brush. We use herbal ingredients like cloves, mint, and licorice. Some folks even keep ancient customs like oil pulling or chewing neem sticks, not because it's nostalgic, but because it works. Modern dentistry with implants, lasers, and 3D imaging seems worlds apart from stone drills and skull x-rays. But the goal remains the same: pain relief, tooth protection, and better living.